We start in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where investors are saying that there has been no move to enforce a ban on exporting of copper and cobalt concentrates, a ban that was supposed to be effective on January 1st of this year. The DRC, one of Africa's top copper producers, ordered the ban in April 2013, but gave mining companies 90 days to clear their stockpiles before pushing the deadline further into the new year. Several emerging resource-rich nations have sought to discourage the exporting of concentrates, the intermediate product that feeds smelters and refineries, so they can shift production to higher-value finished metals and also encourage miners to refine metal within their borders. Many in the industry say the ban is unrealistic, as acute electricity shortages in the country severely hamper processing activity. Congo attempted to introduce similar rules in 2007 and 2010, but each time the decision was reversed. As fighting continues in South Sudan, many Ugandan traders are counting their losses. As CCTV's Michael Baleka reports on a story of one Ugandan trader forced to flee the nation's youngest country after fighting broke out just 3 weeks ago.
For the last 5 years, Paul Akena has been working on his outdoor advertising business in South Sudan. When fighting broke out in the capital Juba, together with colleagues, he shut down operations and fled back to Uganda.
Everything that stands still, everybody's hopes are shattered. We basically don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. So what I would say is there's lots of uncertainty, and right now business is surely at standstill.
Having started small back home in Kampala, like many Ugandan traders in 2008, Akena moved to Juba to find his fortune. But he left in a hurry because of the fighting.
We actually had a lot of client commitments to fulfill. We had so many billboard flexes to put up and also new billboards to erect. Right now we've left most of them on the streets of Juba, just lying down.
Being South Sudan's major trading partner, thousands of Ugandans have businesses in the world's youngest nation. Since fighting broke out, the Ugandan military has evacuated more than 1,000 people from troubled areas. But Paul Akena is one of many Ugandan business people who hopes to soon return and pick up where he left off.
South Sudan has been in war before, and we have been monitoring the situation day by day, and we had reached a point when we knew for sure South Sudan will not go back to war again. Now that it happened during a time when you already say, you know, we are going full throttle, there is no return. And we still maintain our stand, we are not returning. I mean, we just have to wait for it to go back and we go and continue working.
Many foreigners who are doing business in South Sudan are uncertain about the future of their trade. They are hopeful peace can be restored and trade can return to normal. But every day the fighting continues, it hurts them financially. Michael Baleka, CCTV, Kampala.
Businesses have continued to bear the brunt of the conflict in South Sudan, and the global economy is definitely starting to feel the punch. Joining us live with a further assessment of the situation is our correspondent, Kelly Lemon, who's live for us in London. Thank you for joining us tonight. Kelly, how are investors viewing this conflict when looking at the risk-reward ratio in South Sudan?
Well, as you know, the reward very much comes with the risk, but analysts we've spoken to say South Sudan is in a risk-off phase at the moment. And the reason for that is globally investors have access to cheap prices for less riskier assets, which quite frankly are more appealing at this stage. But longer term, South Sudan may be worth the risk. Now, analysts say if the political situation stabilises, and that's a very big if at this stage, and if South Sudan goes ahead with potential plans to build a pipeline through Kenya rather than relying on the northern pipeline, then investors are looking at a much better bet. But as I said, there are quite a few hurdles there, and as it stands, some of the investors we've spoken to say the risks are just too high for the rewards on offer.
Kelly, how much is the volatility in South Sudan factored into oil prices?
Well, this situation has been going on for some time, and investors are well aware this is a problematic region. In contrast, Brent oil prices have remained relatively steady over the past few years, with about a $10 per barrel range that we've seen. Now, we did see some volatility as we headed into the holiday season, and that was triggered by the events in South Sudan. But overall, analysts say the instability of the region has been factored into longer-term pricing. Now, OPEC is echoing this, as we're not really seeing any drastic changes on the cartel's part either at this stage.
All right, thank you for that. That's Kelly Lemon joining us live from London. Continued military strikes and insecurity at major ports and oil fields are undermining Libya's ability to pay public salaries, as well as deterring foreign investment altogether. militias and tribesmen have seized ports and oil fields across Libya to press their political and financial demands, potentially cutting output to around 220,000 barrels per day, this from 1.5 million in July of last year. Oil is the main source for the country's budget and for funding of food imports. The Labor Ministry now warns that salaries for most Libyans are at risk should the oil pipelines and production facilities, as well as exploration efforts, continue to be affected by the blockages. The government has put pressure on tribal leaders in East Libya to persuade an armed autonomy group to lift the blockage of ports there, previously accounting for some 600,000 barrels of oil per day. Uganda held its benchmark lending rate at 11.5%, citing expectations that private consumption was expected to rise as credit supply expanded. According to the central bank, economic growth in the first quarter of the 2013-2014 year slowed due to drought. This while full-year growth is expected to remain within earlier projections. President Yoweri Museveni expects economic growth to accelerate to about 6.2% for the rest of the 2013-2014 fiscal year, bolstered by the greater electricity supply. The East African country is on the cusp of a petrodollar-fueled boom after commercial hydrocarbon deposits were found along its border with the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2006. Production is estimated to begin in 2016 at the earliest, as the government is investing heavily in the necessary infrastructure, including dams and roads. All right, we're taking a short break, but here's what we have coming up next. Zimbabwe to import maize to bridge supply deficit.
Biz Asia. Asia means business.
Welcome back. We'll start back with Uganda and Tanzania, two countries that attracted the most foreign direct investment in East Africa in 2012. This was bolstered by discoveries of vast energy resources. According to the State of East Africa 2013 report published by consulting firm Deloitte, the region attracted foreign direct investment inflows of about $3.9 billion in 2012. This is a $1.8 billion increase from 2011. The two main energy-rich countries of Uganda and Tanzania received the lion's share of 90% of the investment inflows into the region. Rwanda recorded an increase in some $54 million, while Kenya shrank by almost $76 million. While Burundi, on the other hand, continued to receive modest investment inflows. Though the reports say that the focus of the extractive sector has been the possibility of overshadowing other investments in East Africa, it says investment in healthcare, financial services, and the production of cement were also recorded in the 2012 year. Zimbabwe is importing around 150 tons of maize from neighboring South Africa to guarantee food supplies before its April harvest. According to a survey by the Zimbabwe Vulnerability Assessment Committee, at least 2.2 million people in rural areas will be required food aid before the April's harvest. The country has been facing perennial food shortages, prompting the government to import maize from neighbors to supplement local production. Poor food production has been blamed on land reforms, which saw the seizure of white-owned commercial farms under President Robert Mugabe's land reforms for redistribution. Zimbabwe needs over 2 million tons of maize annually to feed its 14 million citizens. But the last year, the country produced only 800,000 tons. This is a drop from 1.4 million from the previous year. All right, connectivity to the internet is still a struggle for many around the world, as most internet routers and modems are made for use in cities like London or New York, and they don't address the structural and access issues seen in less developed areas. Frustrated with their own connection issues, Kenyan developers set out to address this gap in the market with a tool they named Brick. Brick's a little black box that has set its goal on stabilizing internet access. Earlier on, I spoke to Eric Hirschman, the CEO of the company, leading the way with this hardware development. Looking to find a way to change the flow of information in the world so that ordinary people can have their voice heard, co-founder of the internationally acclaimed crowdsourcing platform Ushahidi, Eric Hirschman developed his latest tool, the Brick. The Brick's a little black box smart enough to switch itself between Ethernet, Wi-Fi, 3G or 4G networks, depending on the strongest determinable connection strength. He shares with us his motivation in developing his latest productivity tool.
So many people in the world have a hard time with internet connectivity. And it turns out that the routers and modems designed for the world are designed for actually London and New York. When those of us who live in Nairobi or New Delhi have different infrastructure issues, and when the power goes out or the internet connectivity changes, it's faster on 3G now than it was on the Ethernet cable. And how do you switch over when you're on one of these old-fashioned systems or systems built for a different part of the world?
In some African cities and in other non-traditional living units around the world, such as mobile boat homes, trying to connect to the internet is not easy. Currently, routers and modems rely on being plugged into a power source, an option not always available for many. But this is not the only demographic in need of an alternate internet connection method. Businesses with remote sites are also finding use for the Brick.
We've also found that there's a huge demand in the enterprise market. Businesses need connectivity not only for their people, but for their devices. So they have sensors and computational devices out in the field, and they need those connected as well. And so they need redundancy so that if something fails, which typically does happen, then you need a failover, and this provides that failover inside of the box.
Providing solutions comes with its own set of challenges, such as that of finding financing, identifying local rapid prototyping facilities, and one challenge Hirschman says he's still surprised to be encountering. What has been your biggest obstacle so far in creating this over the last 2 years?
There's this perception of what Africa is, and usually that perception is rooted in stories of Africa from the 80s and 90s. And those of us who live here or work here know that the Africa of today is very different. And what that means is that I spend half of my time educating people on the market here, especially investors. They're interested in it, but they have this kind of red flag in their mind about Africa, and you have to explain, actually, this is the next blue ocean.
The next blue ocean, indeed. With over 1 billion people living in Africa, and just 10% of them being connected to the internet, the return on investment for an internet company able to provide strong and steady signals within the continent's infrastructure would seem to indicate all gains. Jiitu Abraham, CCTV. All right, let's go now to the markets to see what we've been tracking here for you at Biz Africa. The Nigerian All-Share Index is closing the day in the green at 0.54%. The JSE is closing the day today in the red, down 0.82%. The Nairobi Securities Exchange is posting today in the green at 0.44%. And lastly, the EGX is, of course, closed because today is Friday. That's all we have for business tonight. Back to you, Benita.
Thank you, Jiitu.